The sun hung low over the rugged desert, throwing long shadows across the dry earth. Heat waves danced above the sand, and the wind carried a quiet whisper through the tall rocks. In this harsh land lived a young Apache woman named Nira. She was known for her sharp mind, brave heart, and strong spirit. But on this day, fear followed her like a shadow she could not escape. Nira had been marked for death. The mark came not through words, but through the silent message left outside her home, 3 black stones arranged in a circle. Every Apache in her region knew what it meant. It was a warning used by a ruthless group of men who worked in the dark, far away from the reach of the law. They targeted those who stood in their way, and Nira had seen something they wished had stayed hidden forever. Only 2 days earlier, she had witnessed these men dealing illegal weapons near her tribe's river. She had not meant to see it. She had simply gone to the water to collect herbs, but she saw too much, and the men saw her too. Now they wanted to silence her before she could speak. Fear tightened her chest, but Nira refused to show weakness. She gathered her few belongings, a knife, a water pouch, and a small blanket, and left before sunrise. She knew they would come. They were known for tracking their prey across miles of unforgiving land. Once they marked someone, they rarely failed. As Nira walked through the desert, she kept her eyes open for signs, broken twigs, loose stones, or dust rising in the distance. Every sound made her heart jump. A bird's sudden cry, the distant howl of a coyote, even the rustle of dry grass felt like danger approaching. But she kept moving. She had to. Hours passed. The heat grew stronger. Sweat rolled down her temples as she climbed over rocks and crossed dry riverbeds. She prayed the men were still far behind. But deep in her heart, she knew they had already begun the hunt. By late afternoon, she reached a narrow canyon. Its walls rose like giant guards on both sides. The shade gave her a moment of relief. She stopped to drink from her pouch, only to hear something that made her freeze. Slow, heavy, getting closer, her breath caught. She pressed herself against the canyon wall, listening. The sound echoed between the rocks. Someone was coming, and the steps belonged to a big horse, much larger than the horses her people used. She looked around desperately, searching for a place to hide. But the canyon was too open. The hoofbeats grew louder. Nira tightened her grip on her knife. If this was one of the men, she would fight. She would not let herself be taken easily. A tall shadow stretched across the ground. Then a rider appeared at the canyon entrance, but he did not look like the men she feared. He was a lone rancher, broad shoulders, dusty clothes, and a tired horse that looked like it had traveled far. The man stopped when he saw her. His eyes narrowed with confusion, not anger. "You lost?" he asked, his voice steady. Nira did not answer. She did not trust him. She took a step back, ready to run, but then another sound reached her ears, this time from behind. More hoofbeats, faster, more than one horse. Her heart dropped. The rancher noticed too. He looked past her, toward the canyon she had come from. Dust rose in the distance. 3 riders approaching fast. "Someone's after you," the rancher said quietly. Nira's silence was answer enough. Before she could react, he dismounted and stood between her and the approaching riders. He rested his hand on the handle of his gun, not in anger, but in a calm, practiced way that showed he had faced trouble before. "You don't have to trust me," he said without turning to her. "But you're not facing them alone." Nira stared at him, confused and surprised. She had never asked for help. She had not expected any. Yet here stood a stranger willing to stand between her and death. The canyon trembled as the riders drew closer. Nira knew the deadly mark had brought her into a nightmare. But she did not know that this lone rancher would change everything. Their fight for survival was only beginning. The canyon filled with the sharp echo of hoofbeats as the 3 riders thundered closer. Dust clouded the air, and the ground trembled. Under their weight, Nira felt her pulse racing in her throat. She had been running for days, fearing this moment. Now it was here too soon, too fast. The lone rancher stood calmly, his hat tilted forward, his hand hovering near his holster. Nira did not know his name, yet something in his posture showed he had no intention of stepping aside. He was not afraid, or if he was, he hid it well. "You should go," Nira whispered, her voice trembling. "They are dangerous men." The rancher shook his head once. "So am I when someone needs help." She stared at him, surprised by his simple words. Few men were brave enough to stand against hired killers. Fewer would do it for a stranger. The riders burst into the canyon, pulling their horses to a sharp stop when they spotted the rancher blocking their path. Their leader, a sharp-eyed man with a scar running down his cheek, glared at him. "This ain't your business." The scarred man growled. "Move aside." The rancher didn't move. He kept his voice steady. "She's under my protection." Now, a tense silence followed. Nira felt the air thicken like a storm ready to break. The scarred man let out a short, ugly laugh. "You protect her, you die with her." The rancher didn't flinch. The moment stretched quiet, dangerous, waiting. Then everything exploded at once. A gunshot cracked through the air. Horses reared. Nira ducked instinctively. The rancher moved with surprising speed, firing back before the echo had even faded. Chaos filled the canyon as dust and gunfire danced together. The rancher shot the weapon from one rider's hand, sending him screaming as he fell from his saddle. The other two charged forward, firing wildly. Nira pressed herself against the canyon wall, covering her head. "Run!" The rancher shouted, but her legs refused to move. She watched, frozen, as the rancher faced all three men alone. He stepped forward, using the rocks as cover, firing with calm precision. Every movement he made was sharp and certain, like a man who had survived too many gunfights to count. The scarred man aimed directly at him. Their eyes locked, two predators reading each other's next move. Before the scarred man could shoot, the rancher kicked loose a chunk of rock. It tumbled down, startling the man's horse. The animal reared, and his shot flew into the sky. In that split second, the rancher fired again, hitting the man's shoulder. He toppled from his horse with a cry of rage. The two remaining riders fled in panic, disappearing back into the desert. Dust hung in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. The rancher lowered his gun slowly, his breath steady but heavy. Nira stepped forward, her heart racing. You fought them alone," she said softly. He holstered his weapon, turning to look at her. "You would have done the same if you had a chance." "No," she whispered. "They would have killed me." The rancher studied her for a moment. His eyes were rough but kind, the eyes of a man who had seen pain and carried his own share of scars. Then he gave a small nod. "I'm Jace," he said simply. "If those men want you dead, they'll be back. We need to move." Nira hesitated. She had trusted no one since the mark appeared. Trust meant weakness. Trust slowed you down. Trust got you killed. But this man, this stranger, had risked everything for her without a single question. "Why help me?" she asked quietly. Jace looked out at the open desert. The wind tugged at his coat as if urging him onward. "Because nobody deserves to run alone," he said. "Not from men like that." The words settled into her heart like a weight she didn't know she had been carrying. She nodded slowly. Together, they left the canyon, moving into the long stretch of empty land ahead. The sky turned orange as the sun sank lower, and shadows stretched across the sand. Nira walked beside Jace, unsure of what waited for them, but knowing she was no longer facing it alone. Behind them, the fallen assassin pushed himself up, gripping his bleeding shoulder. His eyes burned with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed, and it wasn't. Trouble still hunted them, and it was getting closer. The desert stretched wide and silent as Nera and Jace made their way across the open land. The sky had turned a deep orange, and the last rays of sunlight glowed against the cliffs behind them. Every step they took felt heavy, not just from exhaustion but from the weight of danger still following close behind. Jace led the way with steady, confident strides. His horse walked beside him, tired but loyal. Nera walked a few feet behind, her eyes scanning the horizon, watching for movement, dust, or any sign that the riders had returned. She had been hunted before, but never like this, not with killers. Who knew the land as well as she did? Jace glanced at her every so often. He noticed the way she touched the knife tied at her waist, the way her eyes sharpened at every sound. She was scared, but she was strong. Stronger than most people he had met. "We'll stop up ahead," Jace said, pointing toward a cluster of low rocks. "My cabin's not far from here. You live alone?" Nera asked quietly. "Always have," he replied. He didn't say more, and she didn't ask. Silence settled between them again, but it was not uncomfortable, just cautious, as if both were figuring out how much of themselves to share. As the stars appeared above the desert, they reached a small wooden cabin tucked between two ridges. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. No horses stood outside. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Jace stopped suddenly. His hand moved to his gun without a sound. Nera froze behind him, sensing the shift in the air. "What is it?" she whispered. Jace nodded toward the cabin's door. It stood open, just an inch, but open enough to know something was wrong. "I never leave it like that," Jace said. The hairs on the back of Nera's neck rose. Danger was close. They both felt it, heavy and cold. Jace handed his horse's reins to Nera. "Stay low. Keep behind the rock. If something goes wrong, you run, understand?" Nera shook her head. "I will not leave, understand?" he repeated firmly. After a moment, she nodded. Jace moved forward like a shadow, silent and controlled. The moonlight caught the edge of his revolver as he approached the door. He pushed it open with the tip of his boot. The cabin was dark. Still. Too still. Jace stepped inside, his gun raised. The floor creaked underfoot. He scanned the room, the overturned chair, the open chest, the smashed lamp on the table. His belongings were scattered across the floor. Someone had been here. Someone who wanted him to know they had been here. Suddenly a faint click echoed from behind him. Jace spun around. Raising his gun, Nera stood in the doorway, her knife drawn. "Someone was here," she whispered. "I know," he said. Her eyes scanned the room quickly. They searched everything. Jace crouched near the table and picked up a piece of cloth. It was torn from a rider's jacket, the same dark color the scarred man's group wore. "They wanted information," Jace said, "about me, and now they know you're with me." Nera swallowed hard. "This is because of me," Jace stood. "This is because of them, not you." She lowered her gaze. Ashamed, she had brought danger to his doorstep. This man had helped her without hesitation, and now his home was violated because of her. But when she looked up, Jace was not angry, only determined. "We can't stay here," he said. "They'll be back. Where will we go?" Nera asked. "There's a canyon north of here. Deep, hard to reach. My friend used to run cattle there. It's safe enough to hide for a while." A sudden rustle outside made both of them stiffen. Jace grabbed Nera's arm and pulled her behind the wall. The sound came again, soft footsteps, careful, trying not to be heard. "They found us," Nera whispered. Jace's voice was low. "Not yet, but they will." He peeked through the cracked window. At the edge of the trees, a figure stood watching the cabin, silent, motionless. A shadow against the moonlit sand. It was the scarred man, alive, armed, waiting. Nera felt her heart pound. Jace tightened his grip on his gun. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with warning. "They know where we are," he said. Now the real chase begins. And as the wind howled through the empty desert, the two of them realized something else. They were no longer just running. They were being cornered. The night air grew colder as Naira and Jace slipped away from the cabin, leaving the shadow of the scarred man behind them. The desert moon shone brightly overhead, lighting their path, but also exposing their movements. Every crunch of gravel beneath their feet felt too loud, too dangerous. Jace kept his voice low. Stay close. We move until dawn. Naira nodded, clutching her small bundle of belongings. She had traveled alone for days before meeting Jace, but tonight felt different. She was no longer running only for herself. She was running beside someone who had chosen to stand between her and death. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were their footsteps and the distant cry of an owl. Jace scanned the horizon constantly, looking for shadows that did not belong to the landscape. After an hour of walking, they reached a narrow trail that wound between two steep ridges. The path was tight, barely wide enough for the horse. Loose. Rocks clattered beneath their steps. This way, Jace whispered. No one rides horses through here. Too dangerous. That gives us an advantage. Naira understood. The assassins were skilled riders, but they avoided places that could trap them. This trail was a risk, but also a shield. Halfway through the ridge, Naira stumbled. Jace caught her arm before she fell. You're exhausted, he said softly. We'll keep moving, she replied quickly. I have to. Jace studied her face. Her eyes were tired, her lips dry, and her steps shaky. But behind the exhaustion, he saw the same fierce determination she had shown since the moment he met her. We'll rest soon, he said. But first, we need distance. The wind picked up, brushing cold fingers along their skin. Naira pulled, her blanket tighter around her shoulders. When did they mark you? Jace asked gently. Naira hesitated. She had told no one, not even her own people, the full truth. But something about Jace, his steady presence, made her feel she could trust. Him, 2 days ago, she said. I saw them trading weapons near the river. They saw me watching. She paused, her voice tight. I thought, maybe they would forget. Maybe they would not follow an Apache woman. Jace shook his head. Men like that never forget. Fear being exposed, Naira swallowed hard. And now you are in danger because of me. Jace stopped walking and turned toward her. The moon lit the strong lines of his face. You didn't bring me danger, he said. I stepped into it. I made that choice. The words settled deep in her heart, warming her in a way the cold desert wind could not. They continued walking, until they reached a small shelf of rock where the trail widened. Jace led the horse behind a boulder and unrolled a blanket. We'll rest here, he said, only for a short time. I'll keep watch. Naira sat near the rock wall, her knees pulled close. She stared out at the dark stretch of desert, imagining the scarred man somewhere out there, searching, hunting, relentless. Why do they follow so far? She whispered. Jace sat beside her, leaning his back against the stone. Because you saw something that could ruin them. They can't risk you talking. She lowered her head. I did not want this. I only wanted to gather herbs. Sometimes trouble finds good people, Jace said quietly, and sometimes good people need help to fight back. Naira looked at him, surprised by the gentle strength in his voice. Why help me, Jace? She asked again, softer this time. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I've seen what men like them do. I've seen lives destroyed because no one stood up. His eyes darkened at old memories. I won't let it happen again. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound. Jace straightened instantly. Naira held her breath. A distant echo light, rhythmic, too controlled to be natural. Footsteps. Several of them. They found the cabin, Jace whispered. They're following our trail. Nera's heart raced. What do we do? Jace rose, offering her his hand. We make a pact. From this moment on we survive together. No one faces this alone. Nera took his hand without hesitation. It wasn't just a pact. It was the beginning of a bond forged in fear, danger, and hope. Jace grabbed the horse's reins and extinguished the small ember of warmth they had created. Come on, he said. We head for the canyon. It's the only place they can't ride us down. Nera followed him into the darkness, her fear replaced by a new feeling. She was no longer just a woman running for her life. She was part of a team, and together, they were harder to kill. The sky slowly brightened as dawn approached, brushing the edges of the desert with pale colors of silver and rose. Mira and Jace had been moving all night, climbing higher into the rocky land north of the cabin. The canyon Jace spoke of was still miles away, but they could not slow down now, with danger pressing against their backs. The horse breathed hard, its sides rising and falling in quick motions, but it kept going, loyal to Jace's voice and steady hands. Nera walked beside him, her feet aching, her throat dry, yet she never complained. She knew the assassins were not far behind. If she stopped, she might never start again. Suddenly, Jace raised a hand. Nera froze. He bent down, touching the sand. A hoofprint, fresh. They're close, he whispered. Nera stepped closer, fear tightening her stomach. How many? Jace scanned the ground. 3, maybe 4 horses. Hard riders, they must have picked up our trail near the ridge. Nera's breath trembled. They ride fast. And they won't stop, Jace said. Not until we force them to. His eyes narrowed, not in panic but in calculation. She could almost see his mind turning, forming a plan. We go up that slope, Jace said, pointing toward a rocky incline. Steeper ground, harder for horses to follow. Nera nodded, trusting his judgment completely. They climbed the slope, moving between tall boulders and thorny bushes. The ground became unstable, causing loose rocks to tumble beneath their feet. Every sound felt too loud. Every step felt dangerous. Once they reached the top, Jace guided her behind a cluster of stones. From there, they had a clear view of the land below, and what they saw made Nera's heart stop. In the distance, dust rose like smoke. The riders were coming. Fast. Jace pulled out his binoculars, studying them carefully. The scarred man is leading, he muttered. He looks angry. Nera's chest tightened. I thought you shot him. I did, Jace said. But some men don't stay down for long. Nera turned away from the ledge, fear shaking through her. We should keep moving. We will, Jace said, but we need to slow them down. First, he crouched beside his horse, pulling out a small metal tin from the saddlebag. Inside were sharp iron spikes. Nera frowned. What are those? Caltrops, Jace explained. Scatter them on the trail. Their horses will step on them. They'll have to stop, maybe even turn back. Nera took a handful. Where do you want me to drop them? Jace gave her a small, approving nod. Good. There's a narrow bend in the trail down there. If we place them right, the riders won't see them until it's too late. They moved. Quickly but carefully, placing the spikes in the path, hiding them under thin dust. When they were done, Jace pulled Nera toward the rocks again. Now we watch, he said, lifting his binoculars. Minutes passed. The riders grew closer, their shapes becoming clearer. 3 men, all armed, all furious. The scarred man rode at the front, his face twisted with rage. Nera held her breath. Then it happened. The first rider's horse shrieked and stumbled, collapsing in a cloud of dust. The man fell hard, shouting in pain. The second rider's horse stepped on another spike, rearing wildly and throwing him to the ground. Chaos erupted on the trail as the men scrambled to regain control. Only the scarred man managed to pull his Horse aside in time. He glared up the slope, scanning the rocks. They know we're watching, Naira whispered. Jace nodded. Good. Fear slows men down. But the scarred man did not look fearful. He looked furious, more determined than ever. He shouted something to his fallen companions, and they began checking their horses, removing spikes, patching wounds. They worked fast. Too fast. They won't stop for long, Jace said. We should go. They climbed higher, moving deeper into the rocky land. The sun rose behind them, spreading light across the desert and revealing exactly how exposed they were. Nira's legs burned with each step. How far is the canyon? Still a few miles, Jace said. But once we reach it, they'll lose their advantage. And if they reach us first? She asked. Jace stopped and looked at her seriously. Then we fight. Naira swallowed. Hard. She did not fear battle, but she feared losing the man who had risked everything for her. Jace noticed the worry in her eyes. Hey, he said gently. We're not done yet. We've beaten worse odds. She nodded, gathering her courage. But before they could take another step, a distant gunshot echoed across the rocks. They both spun around. A bullet hit the stone near their feet. The scarred man was no longer following the trail. He had found another. Way up, he's flanking us, Jace said, grabbing Nira's arm. We have to move now. They ran and behind them, the scarred man's voice rose across the desert like thunder. You can't run forever. The chase, once distant, had become deadly close. The sun climbed higher as Naira and Jace sprinted over the rocks. The echo of the gunshot still vibrated through the air, sending a sharp wave of fear through Nira's chest. Jace kept her ahead of him, shielding her with his own body as they scrambled toward a narrow ridge. Don't look back, Jace said, his voice tight. Just move. But Naira couldn't help it. She glanced over her shoulder. The scarred man was climbing fast, faster than she expected. His hands gripped the rocks like claws, pulling himself upward with a frightening mix of rage and determination. He no longer cared about stealth. His voice carried across the desert like a warning. You're trapped, both of you. Jace cursed under his breath. He's closer than I thought. They reached the top of the ridge, but the land beyond looked even more brutal, jagged rocks, steep slopes, and narrow passageways. The canyon was still far away, but now there was no turning back. Through here, Jace said, guiding Naira toward a cluster of tall stone pillars. The path narrowed into a twisting passage, barely wide enough for one person. The horse struggled, its hooves slipping, but Jace steadied it with gentle hands. You're doing good, he murmured to the animal. Just hold on. As they moved deeper into the stone maze, the air grew cooler and the shadows thickened. The wind quieted, leaving only the sounds of their own footsteps. Nira's strength began to fade, but she pushed herself forward. Then they heard it, loose pebbles falling, a soft scrape. Someone was not far behind. Nira's breathing quickened. How does he keep finding us? Jace's jaw tightened. Because he's desperate. And desperate men don't give up. They reached a flat ledge overlooking a wide drop. The only way forward was a narrow path clinging to the cliff wall. Jace looked at Naira. Careful. One wrong step. I know, she whispered. She pressed her body against the cliff and began inching across, her fingers gripping every small hold she could find. The wind tugged at her hair as dust swirled below. Jace followed her, one hand on the horse's bridle, guiding it across with slow, steady steps. Nira reached the other side safely and turned to help. But Jace shook his head. Stay there, I've got him. Just as Jace began crossing the last few feet, a shout tore through the air. There you are! The scarred man appeared at the entrance of the passage, his gun raised. Nira's heart dropped. Jace spun, raising his gun, but the angle was terrible. One wrong movement, and the man could shoot the horse, or worse. Naira, the scarred man grinned. The expression twisted on his wounded face. Thought you could run forever? Jace didn't blink. Thought you'd bleed out. The man laughed. Not today. He fired. The bullet struck the rock near Jace's foot, sending shards scattering. The horse reared, its hooves scraping dangerously close to the edge. Nyra screamed. Jace! But something inside Nyra shifted. Fear cracked open, and strength poured through like fire. She sprinted back toward the ledge, ignoring the drop below her. She grabbed a loose stone the size of her palm, her fingers tightening with a courage she didn't fully understand. The scarred man prepared to fire. Again, Nyra didn't think. She threw the stone with all her strength. It struck him across the temple. The man's head jerked to the side. His aim wavered. Jace seized the moment. He fired once, hitting the rock near the man's feet. The impact sent him stumbling backward. He slid on loose gravel, arms flailing, barely catching himself from falling into the drop. Jace reached Nyra, pulling her back to safety. You okay? Nyra nodded, shaking but alive. I didn't think. You saved my life, Jace said, his voice warm with gratitude. Nyra's breath trembled. We save each other. Behind them, the scarred man dragged himself up, furious but injured. He didn't follow. Not now. Not yet. Jace gripped Nyra's hand. We move. Fast. They hurried toward the canyon, the wind now carrying the distant sound of the scarred man's rage echoing through the stone maze. But beneath the fear, something new had grown between them, a trust stronger than the rocks around them. Nyra had discovered a strength she didn't know she had, and Jace knew. That strength might be the only thing keeping them alive. The canyon was close, but so was the man who wanted them dead. The canyon appeared just as the sun began sinking behind the desert hills, a deep, winding cut in the land, hidden from travelers and far from any known trail. Its steep walls cast long shadows over the rocky path, and a cool breeze drifted upward from its depths. To Nyra, it felt like stepping into the ribs of some ancient beast. To Jace, it felt like their last chance. We'll be safe for a moment, he said, guiding the horse down a slanted path. No horses can follow through here, not easily. Nyra nodded but kept glancing behind them. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every gust of wind felt like breath from the pursuer they feared. The scarred man was still out there, hurt, furious, burning with the desire to finish what he started, and he was closer than they realized. Jace led Nyra deeper into the canyon. The walls tightened around them, forming a natural hallway of stone. At the end lay a sheltered hollow, a place where the wind softened, and the air grew still. We can rest for a moment, Jace said. But only a moment. Nyra sank down on a flat rock, exhaustion washing over her. She closed her eyes, feeling the cold stone under her palms. Her feet throbbed. Her chest burned from hours of running, but she was alive. They both were. Jace knelt beside her. You did something. Brave back there. She shook her head. I was scared. There's no bravery without fear, he said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world softened. But the moment did not last. A sharp sound echoed through the canyon, metal striking stone. Jace stiffened. He's here. Nyra rose quickly, her hand flying to her knife. Another sound. A slow scrape. Then a voice, low and cold, drifting through the canyon like a chilling wind. End of the trail. Nyra's blood ran cold. The scarred man emerged from the shadows, limping but alive, a revolver in one hand and fury in his eyes. His face was bruised, a dark cut running across his cheek where Nyra's stone had hit him. He looked like a man who had crawled through hell just to bring hell to others. Jace, he stepped protectively in front of Nyra. It's over, he said. You're injured, leave now, and you might survive. The scarred man laughed, a harsh, broken sound. I didn't come this far to walk away. He raised his gun. Jace fired first. The shots collided with the canyon walls, exploding in thunderous echoes. Dust rained from above. Nera ducked behind a slab of stone as the scarred man fired back. The bullet striking so close, it sent shards cutting across her shoulder. Pain flashed through her, but she didn't scream. Jace moved fast, shifting between rocks, keeping himself between the scarred man and Nera. But the canyon was tight, and the scarred man used its curves like a trap, advancing with cold precision. "You cost me too much," he snarled. "You shoot me, you break my men, you ruin everything I built." Jace fired again, forcing him to duck behind a boulder. "You built nothing," Jace shouted. "You destroy lives. That ends today." The scarred man's eyes flashed with hatred. "Then come kill me." Silence followed sharp and heavy. "Jac, he looked at Nera. "Stay down. I need you safe." Nera grabbed his arm. "No, we face this together." He hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he nodded. "Jac, he moved left. Nera moved right." They split like two shadows, forcing the scarred man to track both sides. Confusion flickered across his face, just enough. Jace fired again, drawing the man's attention. The scarred man leaned out, aiming at Jace. That was his mistake. Nera sprang from behind the rock, knife raised. She moved silently, swiftly, like a spirit of the canyon itself. Her blade cut across the man's arm, making him shout and drop his aim. Jace seized the moment. He tackled the man, knocking the gun loose. It clattered across the stone floor. The two men struggled violently. Dust swirled around them as fists flew and boots kicked. The scarred man, despite his injuries, fought with savage strength. He wrapped his hands around Jace's throat, pressing down with brutal force. Nera screamed and lunged, but the man kicked out, sending her sliding across the rock. Jace's face turned red. His breath choked off. The scarred man leaned closer, whispering, "You should have stayed out of it, rancher." Nera forced herself up despite the pain. Blood trickled from her shoulder, but she ignored it. She grabbed a fallen piece of stone sharp, heavy, and rushed forward with the last of her strength. She struck the scarred man across the head. He collapsed instantly. The canyon fell silent. Jace gasped for air, coughing hard as Nera dropped the stone and fell beside him. "It's over," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's over." Jace looked at the unconscious man, then at Nera. "Because of you. Because of your strength." She helped him sit up, tears forming in her eyes, not of fear, but relief. The final confrontation had ended, but the story between them was far from finished.